All right, Matt, let's get out of here so our guest host can take over, okay?
All right, let's see ya.
He's Ted Lasso, I'm Coach Beard, and this is a special Halloween edition of the D3 Datacast.
How you doing, Beard?
Doing great, doing great. So this is obviously a Halloween costume episode, which means, Matt, that November is right around the corner. That's the start of the Division III basketball season. And as we did last year, we're going to go through the top 50 games to kick us off for that first month of the season, the top 50 games in November. All right, just a couple of quick notes, Matt, here before we get into it. We did exclude any conference games from this list. That we see more and more early conference matchups, it seems like these days. And there are some good ones that will take place in November, but we excluded those from this list. This is just non-conference games. And the other thing, Matt, is there's a lot of good games that just won't even make this list. As we started to put it together, just kind of big board the whole thing, I think that I made a first run through it, and the list was already up to like 30 just a week into the season. We realized we needed to pare it back a little bit. So, hey, there might be some games that you're really looking forward to that don't make this list. That's really no indication of that your excitement should be any less for that game. It's just that there are so many good games to look forward to. We actually had a problem keeping it to 50.
Yeah, we had to remove some at the last minute and adjust some games. But if you have other great games that you are watching, post it in the comments below. There's more great games out here than we're going to catch. But this is also just a measure of how many great non-conference matchups we're getting, especially early in the season. We're getting more and more of those as coaches continue to see just how important strength of schedule is and regionally ranked wins are. And I think that's great to see. It's great for us fans, and I think it's going to prepare these teams well for March play, even here in November.
Well, you mentioned it, great games very early. So let's jump right Matt here. Opening night, November 8th, right off the tip, we have the preseason number one and defending national champion Christopher Newport captains taking on heading on the road to take on the number 8 in the preseason poll, Hampton Sydney Tigers, who have also been voted as the favorites in the ODAC preseason poll.
Yeah, right away, opening night. This could be the single best matchup of the entire month. One of the best matchups of the entire season. Like you said, number one versus number 8. Big Region 6 implications here if both teams live up to the preseason hype. One I am tremendously excited to see, and I will almost certainly be tuned into myself.
And that's not all for opening night. We also have Mary Washington taking on 17th ranked Catholic to begin the year.
Yeah, Catholic is definitely looking like one of the favorite teams in Region 5. Mary Washington was a team that was ranked in Region 6 last year. That Mary Washington was a tournament team last year. I think this is a game that could have lasting implications into February when we're looking at regional rankings and regional ranked opponents. This could be a big game here.
All right, moving to November 10, we have Maryville taking on Rowan. That game will be part of the Rochester tournament at the University of Rochester.
Yeah, great looking tournament here at Rochester. Maryville and Rowan, two teams that are just outside the top 25 poll that we had seen released on October 26. Two teams looking to make their marks in the region, and quite frankly, I expect to make marks in their region. And this is definitely a measuring stick game that both these teams are going to point to later in the season as we won this game, or one of the teams will point to this and say, we won this game, and that's going to feature them highly in their region.
And then the other matchup in that opening round of the Rochester tournament is interesting in its own right, and that's Worcester taking on Rochester.
Yeah, two teams we're not quite sure what they're going to be this year. Rochester actually picked toward the bottom of the UAA, which is a little bit of a surprise for them. But we know that's such a good conference. So even if you're one of the bottom 2 or 3 teams in that conference, you're still a team that almost could beat anyone in the country and probably will beat anyone in the country. So Worcester probably 1 or 2 in the NCAC. Rochester always good. It'll be interesting to see early on in the year which one of these two teams might be poised to make a more national run this season.
And worth pointing out here, we can't include a game that we don't know exactly what is going to take place, right? So here with the tournament format, whoever wins that first game, whoever wins that second game is going to make for a really intriguing championship. Well, and there's going to be a pretty good consolation game for that matter, given the teams involved here. But another one to look forward to, but can't be included here because we just don't know what that matchup will be.
Yeah, and another reason why we can't include all the good games because some of these are tournament matchups that we don't know what the matchups are yet.
Absolutely. Okay, one more for November 10, and that's Roanoke taking on Stockton. And this game will be on a neutral court at Widener.
Yeah, Stockton, a team that's receiving votes early in the season. Roanoke had a great season last year, didn't make the tournament ultimately, but was kind of in that mix in a really deep ODAC. Stockton was in the tournament; they were a host last year. But these are two teams that were very strong. Again, not quite sure what to make of them this season. We're not really quite sure what to make of any team at this point in the season. But this is going to be a great Region 4 versus Region 6 matchup, teams that we could be seeing in those regional rankings come February. And we know in Division 3 basketball, it's not like just the end of the season counts. November counts just as much as January and February. So these games are huge, and Roanoke Stockton looks like a great one.
Moving on to November 11th, we have Marietta taking on Christopher Newport.
Yeah, what a start for Christopher Newport, right? This is our November 11, and we're already talking about their second big game. Marietta is a team that is returning a lot as a team that finished kind of third or fourth. I forget what they were in the OAC last year. Did have a big tournament upset win to get to the OAC championship game last year before ultimately losing there. But they're a team I think on the rise. Christopher Newport, of course, very very good. And so this is just gonna be a strong game. See if Marietta can make their mark, or if Christopher Newport can just carry this gauntlet schedule. They're not afraid of big games. If they can carry this all the way through November.
Next on the list here, we have Williams at WPI.
Yeah, first let's just take a look at these logos. A couple great logos here with the EAFs and WPI. But no, it could be the NESCAC favorite versus the NUMAC favorite, and that's just a big Region 1 versus Region 2 matchup right there. This will kind of the old Northeast region. This game's going to have lasting impacts as we talk many of these games throughout the season. WPI not in the top 25, as you mentioned. Williams highly rated, but this could be a good game for WPI to say, hey, maybe the voters are a little bit lower on us than we should be.
Matt, now maybe a dark horse for the list here. A couple teams that were pretty solid last year that but maybe didn't get quite the top billing of some other teams. That's North Carolina Wesleyan will play at Mary Washington.
Yeah, last year NC Wesleyan was the best Wesleyan. They were a tournament team. Mary Washington was a tournament team. Region 6 goes so deep, though. It's one of the, in my opinion, top two regions in the whole country. But games like this are vital if you want to be in the rankings, even if it's the back end of the rankings, right? You got to win a game like this to set yourself apart. If NC Wesleyan wants to get into those rankings, they're going to have to beat a team like Mary Washington to get there. This is going to be huge for both these programs to try to make their mark early.
All right, continuing for November 11, we have St. Joseph, Connecticut taking the road uh, up to Middlebury. Matt, and a couple teams that will be a really interesting matchup as we try to figure out what these two teams are going to be for this season.
Yeah, Middlebury did find their way into the poll at 24. St. Joseph just out. They were receiving votes. But I think both programs trying to replace significant chunks of their roster last year. For Middlebury, it's Alex Sobel, who's going to take his grad year, I believe it is, in Division 1. And St. Joseph, from my research so far, is going to be trying to replace big chunks of their rotation. So what are they going to be last year as a program that's been so dominant the last couple of years? Middlebury had such a great run last year in the middle of the season. Who can kind of replace that production this season? This is going to be a great early indicator of maybe who is going to be in that Region 1 mix this year. Is it going to be St. Joseph? Is it going to be Middlebury? Is it maybe going to be both teams, or is one maybe not quite there yet?
Last year we saw some good ones in Region 10 with Texas teams taking on California. We have one here with East Texas Baptist heading to California to take on Pomona Pitzer.
Yeah, really, really love these Texas versus California Region 10 early season matchups. They have big implications later on in the year, obviously, to sort through this region when some of these teams have played each other. And this is as big as any of the others as well. As like you said, ETBU, I think very much in that ASC mix. Pomona Pitzer probably very much in that SCIAC mix. So the winner here has a big leg up, definitely between each other, but between other teams in the region. When you talk about common opponents and this head-to-head game here, this is going to have lasting impacts on the Region 10 rankings.
All right, and then I think this is new for this year, Matt, called the Scholars Classic taking place at NYU. We have some really interesting matchups. The first game noted here is Swarthmore taking on Wash U, and again, this is part of the Scholars Classic being played at NYU.
Yeah, a lot of good events this year. We're going to probably talk about the Great Lakes Invitational. But I think this is just with the power of the teams in this 4-team event, the Scholars Classic. I think this is unmatched this year. Definitely games I'm going to be watching. Swarthmore, Wash U. Look at that first matchup there. Two teams in the top 25 preseason poll. Two teams I expect to be in the NCAA tournament, probably in at least the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. This is just a great event here at NYU. I'm glad these two conferences, these two UAA programs, and these two Centennial Conference programs are getting together, because this is just tremendous basketball for Division III fans.
And the other half of the event there, Johns Hopkins playing host NYU.
Yes, NYU checking in at number 9, Johns Hopkins checking in at number 12 in the preseason poll. Just another high-powered matchup. We're going to say for all these games, right? Tremendous regional rankings implications when we're talking about results versus regionally ranked opponents, particularly. We could get some more common opponent-like matchups when you talk about a UAA team playing a Centennial Conference teams and then switching opponents later on, which we're going to get to. Just really great for those tournament criteria heads, and just going to be great Division III basketball. These are the games you point to for people who are maybe skeptical of the Division III level. Like, go watch Johns Hopkins and NYU play, or SWAT and Wash U, and then tell me that these guys could play at a higher level potentially if they wanted to.
All right, moving to November 12, we have Carnegie Mellon at Whitman. And Matt, I'm confident in saying that Carnegie Mellon will be the only team in this list that was picked in their conference preseason poll to finish
Yeah.
last.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the UAA all season long, because they look like they're the best league once again. They look like they're probably even better and deeper than they were a season ago. I'll be pretty shocked if all of these teams don't finish as like top 100 type teams, and that kind of top 100 type cutoff will get you into a list like this of top 50 games in the month. So Carnegie Mellon, even though they're toward the bottom of the UAA, it's still a very good team, very good program. And this one's just fun, talking about a team from Pittsburgh and a team from the Pacific Northwest, Washington State, playing against each other. That's what's perfect about November basketball. And this is going to be a great game, a great measuring stick game for these two programs.
All right, we talked about the Saturday games at the Scholars Classic. We have an opponent swap here for Sunday, with Johns Hopkins taking on Wash U, and Swarthmore will be taking on the host NYU.
Yeah, going to be some tremendous Sunday afternoon basketball here. Again, swapping opponents. These two games, these 4 games are going to give us just a great insight into where these teams stand in their conferences and where the conferences stand against each other. I don't expect a sweep by any league necessarily against each other, but it'll help validate or maybe make voters reconsider their position in the top 25 poll. Much less, as we are going to repeat over and over again, regional ranking implications. We're going to get right away a view of the UAA versus the top of the Centennial Conference, or at least we assume we are, unless we just see like 4 great games. But yeah, we're going to get a good view of how these two conferences stack against each other, and quite frankly, the top of these two conferences up against each other.
All right, that's a lot of good games so far, but that's only week 1, Matt. On to week 2 here. Kicking off our list on November 14, we have Nichols at St. Joseph, Connecticut.
Yes, both programs received votes in the preseason poll. Both programs lose a ton, I believe, from last season. But these two teams were great last season. They were deep tournament runs. If I'm correct, they were both Elite 8 teams last year. Definitely second weekend teams last year. Nichols versus St. Joseph in that region kind of 1 and region 2 area of the country. But we need to know for the 23-24 season, what are these two programs going to be? And this game with them up against each other is going to give us an indication of maybe who's on top and maybe where these two programs stand. And I think we've probably both determined we don't want to just dismiss these programs just because maybe they're losing a whole bunch or they're having to replace some talent. Nichols is a team that unfortunately I probably underrate to begin each season based on where they end up. It seems like they're always in the tournament and they're always going to make a second weekend run. So even though I didn't put them in my top 25, they're definitely a team I'm keeping my eye on. That is Nichols. And I expect them to come up with something this season. And a game like this is what I want to watch.
November 15, we have a Texas matchup between Hardin Simmons and St. Thomas of Texas.
Yeah, Hardin-Simmons was the ASC number 3 team by the coaches in their coaches poll that was released this October. St. Thomas, Texas was last season's regular season champ in the SCAC. They're probably going to be the favorite this year. I would believe they're receiving votes in the poll. But just a great Texas matchup, SCAC versus ASC. Trying to figure out which conference is going to reign supreme this year. All sorts of common opponents type implications here. I'm thinking in my mind, Hardin-Simmons is going to make a sneaky run at the ASC crown. Mary Hardin-Baylor and East Texas Baptist are great as well. I think there's maybe a 3-team race to be had there. We're going to have to see, but it's a game like this that might prove if Hardin-Simmons belongs in that conversation as well.
All right, we're not even halfway through the list, and it's already the third time we're going to mention Christopher Newport. November 15, they host Randolph-Macon, who checks in at number 14 in the D3Hoops.com top 25 poll.
Yeah, this is already Christopher Newport's second top 15 versus top 15 matchup. We already saw them against Hampton-Sydney. Here's Hampton-Sydney's great rival, Randolph-Macon. But Christopher Newport in that coast-to-coast conference without their own conference slate to play during the year, they're going to have to go out and get these other top teams around them. So they can't shy away from a team like Hampton-Sydney or a team like Randolph-Macon. Not that they necessarily want to, because they want to see themselves in that mix for, number one, try to repeat as national champions. They got to play these types of games. But this is a great one. It's a deserving top 50 game. Obviously, Randolph-Macon, we're 2 years removed from their national championship. We're seeing like another group of players from that team rotate out. Right, Miles Mallory is going to be gone. Josh Talbert's going to be gone. So what is Randolph-Macon? I think still pretty good is probably the answer of what is Randolph-Macon. But see them matching up here against Christopher Newport, it's going to prove it or not prove it, right?
Absolutely. All right, one more for November 15, and that's Mount Union at Scranton.
Yeah, this is two purple teams, and I think that's fun. But more than that, right? Mount Union, obviously a Final Four team from last year. Scranton was in the tournament. They won a game before going up against Randolph-Macon at Randolph-Macon and dropping that one. But I think Scranton sees themselves in the mix in Region 5, and Mount Union is definitely in the mix nationally and in Region 7. So whenever we get these cross-regional matchups between teams that hope to figure into those regional rankings, I think that's a really important game to watch. And I think this could be a good one. If Scranton's they're probably going to be the underdog in this one, but can they put themselves on that national map by making this a game or maybe knocking off Mount Union?
One game to highlight for November 16, and that is Nazareth taking on Rochester in a neutral court game that will take place at St. John Fisher.
Yeah. Big bragging rights here in that Rochester, New York area in this kind of in this context here. Nazareth and Rochester, two teams that could figure in the Region 3 rankings. I think I see Oswego State maybe on top of that region. But other than that, I think there's some opportunities for teams to move into the regional rankings. And a game like this, when you see like jockeying for position, who's going to be on top of each other, you need to win these matchups. And Nazareth is a team that has been very good the last couple of years. Rochester as well has been very good for a long time. And trying to see, okay, which one of these, what's the pecking order there in Region 3 going to be? Can Nazareth and Rochester still break into those Region 3 rankings?
On to November 17, where we have a matchup between Co and Illinois College. This is a first round of a tournament at Illinois College.
Yeah, neither of these teams received any votes in the preseason poll. I didn't necessarily expect them to, although I think both were on my personal watch list / consideration list. But both these teams made the tournament last year. Illinois College won the Midwest Conference. Co was the American Rivers Conference representative in what was a really great conference there in the ARC. So I think this is a sneaky good game to watch, especially when you're looking at that kind of Region 9 part of the country. These two teams could very well figure into those rankings, and I think they both have designs on competing for their conference title. Illinois College probably the favorite there rather easily, but Co in a very, very deep American Rivers, they might be in play there to win that regular season title as well.
And then the other two teams taking part in that tournament at Illinois College in the other first round game there, a really good one between Wabash and North Park.
Yeah, two great programs, or look like great programs early. Both were nationally ranked in the preseason poll. Wabash at number 16, North Park at number 21. I don't know that the NCAC had a coaches poll out at the time of this recording, but it looks like Wabash might be the favorite there, either them or Worcester. But I would guess it would be Wabash. At least the top 25 voters picked Wabash. And North Park is the CCIW favorite by the coaches, even though they came up a little bit behind Carthage in the top 25 poll. But either way, these are like the top two teams, one of the top two teams in the NCAC versus one of the top two teams in the CCIW. And that's just a really fun Region 7 versus Region 8 kind of cross matchup between two good leagues in those two conferences. And again, maybe a preview of like a Sweet 16 type matchup that you could see later on in March.
Okay, also Friday, November 17, Matt, taking part in the Small College Basketball Champions Classic in Aberdeen, South Dakota will be Keene State and Stockton.
Yeah, Keene State coming into the year looking like a powerhouse, ranked number 4 in the preseason poll. Stockton is a program that's always good, although I think they have a lot to replace this season. Both these teams were like tournament host caliber last year, so I think Keene State we know is pretty much bringing that back. Stockton we're not quite sure, but a game like this in Aberdeen could really put Stockton on the map for the year to decide to show us if they're a team that's really in position to kind of repeat that again this year out in the NJAC.
And then the other two teams representing Division III at the Small College Basketball Champions Classic, St. John's will take on UW Platteville.
Yeah, UW Platteville was a team that was getting a little bit of a surprising amount of love from the top 25 voters. They didn't break into the top 25, but they got a lot of votes. I think they're a team that returns a lot from last year. I think they were maybe like fourth or fifth ish in the WIAC last year. I think fifth maybe, but they're poised to be a lot better this year if with all those players back. And having another year of experience. St. John's is a team that looks to figure in the MIAC race. They look like they could be a team that's in that Region 9 mix as well. So when you're talking about St. John's versus Platteville, this is very much a game that could really impact the middle to even top of the Region 9 regional rankings once we get to that part of February. This is a game that will feature in both that head-to-head line and probably common opponents line that will have a lot to say about that order.
All right, Matt, you mentioned the Great Lakes Invitational earlier. Here we have a couple Friday games to highlight, starting off with Calvin taking on Marietta.
Yeah, two blue bloods in Region 7, I think. And in history or recent history, as far as I can tell, I think they've only played maybe one time in the 2017 national tournament. So nice to see a regular season matchup here between Calvin and Marietta. Calvin enters the season number 10 in the preseason poll. Marietta not getting any votes, but looks to be, I think, a strong team and a strong program. This is going to be a game for Calvin that they would need to go out there and win and cement themselves as, yes, we want to be a top team in Region 7 and nationally. And for Marietta, they're in the OAC with Mount Union and John Carroll, both teams who are top 5 preseason. They're no stranger to playing these big games, these big teams. They're not going to be scared by a top 10 team coming to the GLI and playing them. And they're used to those games week in and week out, it seems like, in the OAC. So this is a fun Region 7, old Great Lakes region game, and I'm glad we have it here at the GLI.
And our other one to feature here at the GLI on Friday, Matt, from opposite ends of the country,
Yeah.
meeting in Springfield, Ohio. We will have Redlands and Middlebury.
Yeah, it's not the coast-to-coast conference, but you have Vermont versus Southern California here. Redlands and Middlebury. Love to see them meet together in Ohio and come. That's what this, to me, part of what this tournament is about is getting some of the teams from Region 7 and then from around the country as well coming in and playing these games. And I just love that. We don't get a ton of travel in Division III, but California versus Vermont, love to see that.
And then a great 2-day event. Matt, we have a couple Great Lakes Invitational games for Saturday we wanted to talk about here, starting off with UW Oshkosh taking on Redlands in a really interesting game in terms of contrasting styles.
Yeah, when this popped up as a matchup or potential matchup, it was one that we were both, I think, really interested to see. UW Oshkosh is usually one of the slower paced teams in the country. You talk about the WIAC. They're not going to get up and down the floor. They're going to maybe wear you out and take the whole shot clock. Redlands is going to put a little bit of pressure on you and maybe look to score quickly in transition. So getting a contrasting style game like this, as well as teams from different regions together, I think that's going to be fun, and that's going to make this one, besides two good programs, right? This is going to be a game to watch.
And then also Saturday at the GLI, Marietta taking on another blue blood in Illinois Wesleyan.
Yeah. Illinois Wesleyan, I think, is a team to keep an eye on this year, a sneaky team. You maybe would dismiss them based on the results last year, but I think they were ravaged by injuries, had some transfers. Well, this year they have some transfers in the other direction coming back. They have some players returning to health. They were picked fourth by the coaches in the CCIW preseason poll, but that's a strong league. And a team that's in the top four there could be, in play for maybe a top 25 position. Illinois Wesleyan is getting votes. So what are they going to be? I think a game like this, the CCIW number 4 versus the OAC number 3, I think that's a good game. This is between two teams that have both historically and recently been strong, a fun one to see. But I think whoever wins this game, I think is going to have to force people around the country to take notice and say, okay, this team is probably for real this year.
All right, we also wanted to talk about the games at the Small College Basketball Champions Classic that will take place on day 2 of that event on Saturday, November 18. And, Matt, same 4 teams involved here, but we get an interesting switch up in terms of geographic diversity here. St. John's will take on Stockton, and then Keene State will get UW Platteville.
Yeah, no matter which way you organize this, I like the kind of more regional matchups on day 1, but I really like these kind of cross regional matchups. Not that Stockton and Keene are in the same region, but they're like more East Coast teams, right? And Platteville and St. John's are like Wisconsin, Minnesota teams. So to kind of mix that up a little bit and get New Jersey versus Minnesota, and then Keene State versus Platteville, I think that makes it interesting as well, right? To get that more national flavor, that mix of teams. And you talk about kind of like a cross-country, cross-regional measuring stick type of a thing. These types of games really help you, help fans. I don't know that the committee members will see it this way, but kind of help stack the regions against each other and say, well, like region 4 might have this strength, but region 9, I think, is maybe a stronger region because we saw a St. John's beat a Stockton, let's say, or vice versa, right? If Stockton's takes down St. John's, then maybe we'll say, well, region 4 has maybe a little more quality than region 9. So games like this that can really mix up those regions, I think, are fun to see.
Definitely. Next one here, we have Emory at Guilford.
Yeah, UAA versus ODAC, like tremendous to see. Region 6 versus Region 6 matchup. Both these teams were in and around the regional rankings last year. I think they both figured to be in the mix this year. Very, very good, very, very necessary head-to-head type game, and it'll have common opponent implications for their conference mates as well. I think Emory looks like the number 2 team in the coaches poll in the UAA, so very strong there. Guilford third in the ODAC behind Hampton, Sydney, and Randolph-Macon. So a bunch of strong teams there. This looks like it could go. Could be anyone's game, obviously. That's why it's a great game. That's why it's on this list. But definitely one of those games that we're going to point to in February and say Team X is above Team Y because of this result in this Emory-Guilford game that we saw back here on November 18.
All right, Matt, a couple more here to wrap up week 2. We have DeSales traveling to Swarthmore.
Yeah, DeSales is a team that received votes in the preseason top 25 poll. They're picked second in the MAC Freedom. I think Arcadia was picked first and DeSales was second. But their program, DeSales, that returns a bunch from last year's team. And I think if they can, build on what they did last year, they're a team that was definitely on my top 25 watch list. So I think that they're a team that could maybe sneak into the top 25, and they could maybe give Swarthmore a lot of trouble. Not that Swarthmore would overlook DeSales, but this could be a game that maybe is a little bit of a head scratcher if DeSales ends up winning. But I think DeSales is a team that's poised to have a win like that. So I would not be totally surprised if it happened in this game. So DeSales is definitely a team I'm kind of keeping a side eye on to say, like, what are you going to be this year? Are you going to be able to be a team that takes that step forward to be more of that kind of top 25 caliber kind of a program?
And then wrapping up week 2, we have Johns Hopkins at Christopher Newport.
Yeah, just another game that Christopher Newport plays a top-ranked team. Their strength of schedule this year is probably going to be insane. I don't have my projections in front of me, but I think they were one of the top teams in that projected strength of schedule for sure. Johns Hopkins number 12, Christopher Newport number 1. If Christopher Newport survives these first, I think we're only still in week 2, and they're already playing 3 top 25 other top 25 teams. If they survive this gauntlet, they're for sure going to be the number 1 team in the country after Thanksgiving. Even if they take a loss, they could be a team that takes an early loss and still maybe either hangs on to the top spot or still stays in like with the 1, 2, or 3 spot, because they're going to have the best wins under their belt already at that point too. So just amazing work by the Christopher Newport, the schedule here. Coach Krikorian's putting together a great schedule. I hope he doesn't come to regret it, because these are going to be some fun matchups for us fans to watch.
All right, let's move on to week 3, Matt. We've got 11 more games here to talk about in week 3, starting off with Nazareth at Oswego State.
Yeah, we already talked about Nazareth trying to stake their claim in Region 3. I think they had a Rochester matchup earlier. Oswego looks like going into the season the number 1 team in Region 3. So this would be a very big game for the Golden Flyers to say, hey, don't just pencil Oswego in right now. Look at us too. For the flip side of that, Oswego State looking to just put their stamp on the region and say, no, we are going to control this from start to finish. Beating other teams in other leagues in that region, I think will definitely weigh in their favor come regional rankings times, right? So beating an Empire 8 team like Nazareth, would be very strong in Oswego State's favor in that Region 3 mix.
And Matt, this is one we talked about when we unveiled the Fierce Foes set in our Division III trading card series we did over the off season. Most rivalries take place within a conference. This is one of the great ones in Division III that is between members of different conferences, although they're in the same conference for football. But that's Illinois Wesleyan and Wash U.
Yeah, like you said, one of the best non-conference matchups in the country, rivalries in the country. They play every single year. Wash U is in the top 25 preseason. Illinois Wesleyan received votes. They both figure most years into the Region 8 regional rankings. So again, it's always big. Those two teams don't love each other, even though they're not in the same conference. And it's going to weigh. It's usually that region, or at least the way it's constructed right now, the CCIW and Wash U. So like, which order are all those teams in? I would expect to see both these programs in those regional rankings come February, but is it going to be kind of Wash U on top, or is it going to be those CCIW teams on top? In a game like this would be big for Illinois Wesleyan, right, in their pursuit of a Region 8 position, but would also be huge for Wash U as well, obviously. So a game like this, again, a November 22nd game, is going to have huge February implications as well.
In our next game here, Matt, this is the battle for Timken Gymnasium. We have Worcester at Mount Union.
Yeah, played at Timken Gymnasium of Mount Union, not Timken Gymnasium of Worcester. But to me, it's always just really fun when you get like a top OAC versus a top NCAC, just to get that inter-region, Region 7 versus Region 7 matchup. Again, right, when it comes to common opponents, when it comes to head-to-head, who beats who in this game is going to be massive when we're talking about the entire Region 7 picture. So we can't – this game could affect, where John Carroll ends up in the region. It could end up making a difference to Wabash when they end up in the picture, because these are the teams that are going to be at the top of these two conferences, and when someone from the conference plays each other, then that's part of the primary criteria, right, is your common opponent results. So this is going to be a big game just for that reason alone. But I think both Worcester and Mount Union, are programs that have designs on national competitiveness and the national tournament as well.
And one more for November 22nd, we have Brandeis at Babson.
Yeah, Brandeis is a team I think on the rise. They're picked 5th in the UAA, and if you're picked 5th in the UAA, that means you're a top maybe 40 program in the country. Babson picked 2nd in the NUMAC preseason poll. I believe that's just behind WPI. So like a big Region 2 type matchup when you talk about maybe a couple of strong teams in the NUMAC versus a team like Brandeis, and where does the NUMAC stack up against kind of the middle of the UAA there?
All right, November 24th, we'll have another good one down in Texas. Mary Hardin Baylor travels to St. Thomas.
Yep, Mary Hardin Baylor, the number 2 team in the coaches poll in the American Southwest Conference. We already talked about St. Thomas, Texas, playing Hardin Simmons, I believe it was. So here's another opportunity for them to play against an ASC team. And since they've played now what will have been 2 ASC teams, again, that'll have big, who beat who, common opponent type implications. But when you talk about Texas supremacy, you're probably talking about St. Thomas and whoever comes out of the ASC. So to see 2 of these ASC teams play St. Thomas early in the season, I think that's going to give us a good indication of where these 2 conferences lie in relation to one another.
And then on the 25th, we have Mary Washington taking on Rowan. That will be a neutral court as part of the Christopher Newport Invitational.
Yeah, really good Region 4 versus Region 6 matchups. 2 programs receiving votes, looking maybe to jump into the top 25. It would be a game like this that would, a win in a game like this would put them more on the map in voters' minds, and definitely one to watch as we go into late November.
All right. A couple teams we've talked about here, but meeting up for the first time this season, North Park and UW Oshkosh.
Yeah, number 21 versus 25. North Park was the number 21 team there, but CCIW versus WIAC, just always great games. It's always going to be a battle down low, a physical battle. And another game that UW Oshkosh will play that's a little bit of contrasting styles. North Park's a little bit maybe more like Redlands. So maybe these 2 matchups will benefit Oshkosh to play 2 similar type teams. Kind of in close proximity to one another, but a little bit more of a contrasting style between these 2 teams is what they typically play. So it'll be interesting type of a matchup to see. But again, anytime you get a team that's potentially in the top half of the WIAC versus a team that's toward the top of the CCIW, that automatically becomes a game to watch.
And then a good one out in California when NYU travels to Redlands.
Yeah, NYU coming into the season number 9 ranked overall. Redlands receiving votes. Again, New York City versus Southern California. That's a great game that some of that travel that November affords some time to have, and a good game to see maybe where these programs end up. I think there's some, I'm an NYU believer this year. I was an NYU believer last year. Maybe they burned me a little bit with their early tournament exit. But a game like this against what looks to be a strong Redlands program is a game that could put NYU on the map, or it could, make us second guess what is NYU really going to be able to put it all together this year or not? Or is a team like Redlands, who's maybe more of a fringe top 25 team, going to be able to beat them? The travel's tough, right? In Division III, going all the way across the country, but a UAA program might be a little bit more used to that type of a travel since they do that more in conference play. So definitely one I'm excited to see here.
All right, and then another one out in California. Carleton will travel to Southern California to take on Claremont Mud Scripps.
Yeah, Carleton, a program I'm really interested to see this season because they're a team that does lose a bit at the top of their roster. They did receive votes this year, but did not crack into the top 25. Claremont Mud Scripps came in at 23. They're the SCIAC favorite right now in what looks like maybe kind of like I would call it a 3-team race at the top. But yeah, to see a team like Carleton, what are they going to bring back this year? Can they compete with the Claremont Mud Scripps? Is Carleton going to be in the mix in the MIAC and in Region 9? Is Claremont Mud Scripps the team we think they're going to be? This game is going to be a great indicator of all those things.
And then a big one down in Region 6, Matt, November 26th, when Emory travels to Barry.
Yeah, Barry was definitely a team last year that wasn't afraid to state the fact that they were not quite happy with where they ended up in or out of the regional rankings and out of the national tournament, let's say. But I think the honest answer was that they needed to improve their schedule to be considered. They did not have a lot of games against other top teams. This game will be one of those games. So a game versus Emory, 2 Region 6 teams here. They both figure to be in the mix for Region 6 positions. This is exactly the game that Barry needs to play and needs to win if they are going to be in that tournament consideration, I think, this year.
And then one more for week 3 here, Matt, on November 26th. Rowan plays at, let me know if you've heard of them, Christopher Newport.
Yeah, we can't get rid of Christopher Newport. And it's amazing, right? This is like the 4th time we've seen Christopher Newport. No, the fifth.
I think
fifth time we've seen Christopher Newport. And this is one of their quote unquote easiest opponents so far, right? Rowan and Marietta are there like two breaks in their November schedule. I guess I don't know all the other teams that maybe they play that didn't make this list, but they've had so many tough matchups that a program like Rowan, a good program like Rowan, is like almost an afterthought based on all their other games. But this is another tremendous game. Christopher Newport, obviously number one, going to be in and around the top of Region 6 versus Rowan, who was a team that was maybe the top team in Region 4 last year. I'm not quite sure, but could repeat that this year. Could be the top team in Region 4. This could end up being a region number one versus a region number one matchup come the end of the season. So this Christopher Newport Invitational here looks great. This game against Rowan looks great, and it's just tremendous schedule that Christopher Newport has here to start the season.
Fourth week of the season now, Matt. We have here November 28, Tufts at WPI.
Yeah, two programs that were receiving votes outside of the top 25, but still in that mix. You get a NESCAC versus a NUMAC. That's always fun. Region 1 versus Region 2. When you start to try to stack these conferences up against each other, is Tufts going to be a team that could compete with the Williams in the NESCAC? Is WPI really the best team in the NUMAC? Could they be the best team in Region 2? A good or a big potential regionally ranked opponents matchup here. Tufts, WPI, in that old Northeast kind of region. Big game, big programs. Definitely one to watch.
Another big game here, Matt, will take place between UW Whitewater, coming into the season ranked second in the D3Hoops.com preseason poll. The only team other than Christopher Newport to receive a first place vote. They'll travel to 18th ranked Carthage.
Yeah, this one's really fun. UW Whitewater, likely the WIAC favorite, right? Carthage picked second by the CCIW coaches, but might as well be the CCIW favorite because that was like a 1 or 2 poll point separation by the coaches there between Carthage and North Park. So again, a top of the WIAC team versus the top of the CCIW team. Just a great matchup here. I feel like this is maybe a little bit bigger for Carthage. In my mind, they have a little bit more to prove that they do belong in this national mix here. But Whitewater kind of proved it last year with their Final Four run, and they returned most of the team back. But Whitewater does have a coaching change that affects things. Just to see what will happen here when you get a team that's number 2 nationally and a team that's number 18 nationally in conferences like the WIAC and like the CCIW up against each other in the first month of the season. Just tremendous theater there.
Also on November 28, Mary Hardin Baylor will play at Trinity, Texas.
Yeah, another ASC versus SCAC matchup. Mary Hardin Baylor always looking for these games around Texas to get Mary Hardin Baylor coming into the season number 15 in the top 25 poll. Trinity did not receive any votes, but has been a good program in the SCAC, so not a game to overlook. But definitely when you look matching up that state, matching up that region, trying to see where those two conferences stack up against one another, this is definitely a big game to watch in that.
Next up is Keene State at Albertus Magnus.
Yeah, two tournament teams from a season ago, a little bit different coming into this season. Keene State coming in preseason number 4. Albertus not ranked, not receiving votes. But if you kind of look at that GNAC picture, St. Joseph is losing a whole bunch. And, could Albertus be trying to take up that mantle in the GNAC? We saw Albertus Magnus with that huge win last year in the GNAC tournament over St. Joseph. That got Albertus Magnus into the tournament as the GNAC Pool A. They've won big games like this in the past. Could they knock off a Keene State early in November and really put themselves on the radar, or is Keene State just going to be the powerhouse and just going to roll over everybody? I think this is a game to keep an eye on, just to kind of see, hey, how does maybe Keene State match up versus another team who might figure into the GNAC race, and can Albertus, maybe take that step forward and put themselves on top of their own conference?
Yeah, good measuring stick game for Albertus Magnus. All right, Matt, one more day to talk about here to wrap up November. Wednesday, November 29th. A really interesting one here with Trine and Heidelberg.
Yeah, Trine was a team last year trying to break into the Region 7 regional rankings. Heidelberg was kind of right there in the middle of them. At first glance, this game might seem like a Region 7 kind of undercard matchup, But I think Trine's poised to have a good season. They were receiving votes in the poll. I think they have a great group of returning players and also players transferring in from other Division III programs or taking a grad year at Trine. I think Trine could be a team in that top 25 mix. A team like Heidelberg, we know the OAC is strong. They look like a top 4 team in the OAC, probably, or at least in that mix. And if you're in the top half of the OAC, you're obviously a strong program there. Like I said, Heidelberg was a team that was kind of maybe blocking some of those MIAAs from the Region 7 regional rankings. So this could have an implication of who gets in. If Trine wins this game, then by that common opponent type of sense, maybe that also helps some MIAAs get in there as well, and maybe helps get them into the regional rankings while they were kind of left out last year.
And then number 50 on our list here, Matt, wrapping up the month of November here with the last game on our list, November 29 as well, is Maryville, Tennessee against Barry.
Yeah, this is a great looking game here. CCS versus SAA, two teams that didn't quite have the resume to be in the mix at the end of the season last year. But I think both programs have designs on being top programs nationally. Both teams received votes. They could find themselves in the top 25. As early as late November or December if they could win some of these games. But again, we're always talking about, even in November, these games have big implications on eventual regional rankings and eventual tournament selection, at-large selection for a program like Barry or Maryville. It's you never want to say one particular game is a must win, but it's almost like a must win game. You have to win these games. You have to stay above the other team in those regional rankings to get in position to get yourself selected into Pool C or get yourself in the top half of the regional rankings or whatever it might be. These are big games with other teams in your region that are kind of in that similar position as you. These aren't ODAC teams. This isn't Emory we're talking about. They don't have maybe built-in strength of schedule advantages, so they have to go out and schedule these other tough games, and they have to win these games to kind of vault themselves into Region 6 position here.
Well, Matt, that feels like a full season's worth of great games, but that's just November.
Yeah,
And there's some teams that are not on this list or weren't mentioned today just because maybe they didn't have a November game that was worthy. But that doesn't mean they're playing a weak schedule. It might just mean that those games
yeah.
are in December. Of course, December opens up another window where we see a lot of traveling to some great events. There's going to be a lot more great games to look forward to in December. But hey, we get to enjoy November 1st.
Yeah, like you said, there's a bunch of teams that games came to our mind, or I think this team's playing that team, but it was in December or it was around Christmas or around New Year's. Bunches more games, travel opportunities around New Year's as well. This is just the first month of the season. This is just the first 4 weeks of games, and I think we have a great slate picked out here. And like you said, we had to eliminate a bunch of games we wanted to include just because we were over our 50 mark. And there's also conference games start that are, I think CCIW plays games in late November that you could include on a list like this, but we wanted to just make room for these non-conference games. So lots of great basketball for basketball fans. Zach, we're releasing this on October 30, which means November is just a couple of days away. We're going to get these games pretty soon, and that's going to be fun to see.
It definitely will be, and we hope that you join us for this fun ride for this season. We'd love to have you every Monday morning with us, or Matt, earlier, right?
A little bit
That's
earlier.
right. That's right. We have a tier on Patreon. If you are interested in finding out more about how to receive early access to our videos, you can head to patreon.com/D3Datacast. Find more information there. Of course, early access is included with the Great Job Team tier. And we want to give special thanks to all the people who have supported us on Patreon, and that includes Roel Placeris, who is a new Great Job Team member as of the last episode that was published. So special shout out to him.
Yeah, and early access is sometimes a couple of days early for our normal in-season episodes. You could have that ready to go Sunday night instead of having to wait for Monday morning. So if you're just itching for more D3 Datacast, that Great Job Team tier could get you that episode. Maybe even the night before.
Well, that wraps it up for this episode, Matt. I know I don't need to say it for you, but we are itching to get this season going. We're really looking forward to it. It'll be a great season. We're coming off a great tournament, and everything looks like we're set up for another great season. Can't wait to get it going. Hopefully, this list of 50 games whets your appetite a bit. And hey, let's have a great season, and good job, team.
Good job, team.